Tonight on News 5 Live, in Salt Lake City, Utah, Jacob Kingston testifies on Lev Derman's introduction to Belize. A suspected drug plane landed in the vicinity of Monkey River, only the remnants of the torched aircraft was found. Businessman Richard Harrison was killed in an accident on a stretch of the George Price Highway near Ontario Village in Cayo. The local media will only have limited access to the UDP convention on Sunday, but U.S. observers get free flow. And we go one-on-one with a Belizean living in Shanghai and get an account of what's happening in China since the novel coronavirus outbreak. Details of these stories and more coming up in tonight's newscast.
The Belize Bank
Welcome to News 5 Live for Thursday, February 6. I am Marlene Cuellar. A suspected drug plane landed in the Monkey River area sometime late Wednesday night and early this morning. By the time authorities arrived on the scene, the passengers were gone and they found the torch remnants of the aircraft. A photo sent to News 5, believed to be from the scene of the landing, shows a cache of ammunition and that was discovered at the landing site. This morning, the police department informed reporters that they didn't have any information to share at that time, but that they would provide details with a press release. Up to news time, we haven't received that release. This is the second aircraft to have landed in the south in less than 2 weeks and the third since the start of the year. Just last week, we reported on the burnt remains of a twin-engine aircraft discovered in the area of Paynes Creek, a remote location in the Toledo district. It landed on a crude runway that appeared to have been recently created. Well-known businessman Richard Harrison died in a traffic accident this afternoon. He was traveling in his SUV when pieces of lumber from a flatbed truck landed on his vehicle. The Cayo businessman died on impact. Harrison and his brothers had business interests in Big H Company. He was involved in a number of initiatives to protect the environment, and in recent times, he presented his views through his writing. Here is Isani Caetano with this report.
Belizean businessman Richard Harrison, founder of the La Ruta Maya Belize River Challenge in 1998, perished earlier today in a road traffic mishap along the George Price Highway. The former Cayo North standard bearer for the People's United Party was traveling in a sports utility vehicle passing through Ontario Village when a flatbed truck transporting a shipment of lumber reportedly took a turn up ahead. The straps that were used to fasten the planks somehow became dislodged, and the lengths of board flew off the trailer of the vehicle onto Harrison's SUV.
We made the right of play behind the house. That top. I mean, just stand up because we have my companion. She made it outside that. You see, I never see the truck they come, and then time will. I never see this vehicle right, but when I hear bam, then time the
loud noise.
Yeah, hard man, hard. And then well, I forgot to say one tire boss like that, and then when I swing wrong, she tell me no. I said I want to get knock. Well, when she hurried on come, well I come. Well then, when after when the thing knock, before he knock, when he knock, I see the truck. He ran like that, and then afterwards, I see that the tail catch the vehicle because the vehicle. Only the bone will drop and I know my much like that. Now but the tail hit the vehicle and that's why it dashed the vehicle way in the half of the road like that. Yes. Yeah. And then the board start to pour down.
The images taken in the aftermath of the incident suggest that Harrison may have lost control of the vehicle, which was extensively damaged when it came to rest. Dozens of sheets of lumber were strewn across the highway, where emergency responders, including personnel from the National Fire Service and ambulances, were on the scene. So were residents of Ontario who poured out onto the roadside in the wake of the tragedy.
When the board, the strap poured and boss, the board poured down and then the vehicle instantly take the time they come to where you see the board they reach here. Well, all them board made their way out on the road. Then when we try put the board to make them go away for pass through, right? So we put them board there. Yeah.
And this black vehicle, yeah, this second
This second one, yeah, he made it go behind too. Like how the board made it drop, he never get past, he dropped there yet, well, so he rushed gone in there for no get hurt. So he climbed up on a pile of board there.
Oh, so, but nobody get injured in this one, yeah?
No.
That's just in the next one?
Maybe the guy must have made a knock, something like that, because I missed one of the midnight guy made it look on the back. So I don't know if he get knocked away or what.
In May 2014, Richard Harrison envisioned a 10-year initiative which would see the planting of over 100,000 Cortez trees along the same highway where he would later lose his life in an RTA. A few months later, he would offer himself for candidacy in Cayo North, following the abrupt departure of former era Representative Joseph Mahmoud on November 24, 2014. Mahmoud's resignation triggered a by-election in that constituency, where Harrison faced the United Democratic Party's Dr. Omar Figueroa. In early 2015, during the midterm vote, Harrison was routed by Figueroa 2-1. Less than 3 weeks later, the People's United Party replaced Harrison with Michelle Chabat. prompting him to write a lengthy diatribe airing out the party.
We never say demand, only the people will stand up and they watch the vehicle because, well, I say, we not say nobody, right? We not say nobody because the condition how the vehicle made there. We not say nobody, well, we stand up there, they watch, and then when the people, then they come, and they tell the young lady, the child lady, and they come and they say, the way Ghana, well, she Ghana people, well, when she has the guy still blow yet. Well, so, but nobody can do nothing to it because they not allow you to go interfere, right? And so when we stand up there, they watch to see the ambulance come, the first one, and then when afterward the second one come, and then when afterward the policeman then begin start to come.
In private life, Harrison was listed as the managing director of Pragmatica Investments Limited, parent company of Verena Foods, Harrison's Chemicals, and Taverna Santorini. Reporting for News 5, I am Isana Cayetano.
Jacob Kingston continued with his testimony in the Salt Lake City court at today's sitting. Kingston's testimony is highly anticipated and it is critical for the prosecution if it is to seal the case against Lev Derman, his former business partner, who is also known as Levon Termendison. Since Wednesday, Kingston has been providing background to his business relationship to Derman, who is accused with 10 charges of money laundering. This afternoon, the jury heard about Derman's introduction to Belize in 2012. News 5's Hippolyta Novello is embedded in the Utah court and will walk us through today's testimony.
Day 2 of the Kingston testimony began today in the U.S. District Court of Utah here in Salt Lake City. Belize was mentioned, and the name of a former politician and minister was also mentioned. That person is Ralph Fonseca. What the prosecution attempted to do or tried doing is to establish how many meetings, where, and the timeline in terms of those meetings Lev Derman had with Kingston and others. Again, just to point out that today's questioning only dealt to December 2012. The prosecution did not enter into 2013. So they spoke about only 2012 meetings, transactions, text messages sent back and forth, and so forth. Now, during his testimony, Jacob Kingston named Ralph Fonseca as the Minister of Finance, who had meeting with Lev Derman and Kingston and others in Miami in December 2012. Now, viewers might be confused because it was in 2008 that the UDP got into power. So there is no way that Ralph Fonseca could have been the Minister of Finance then. Now, in terms of that reference that Kingston gave Ralph Fonseca, we're not sure how is it that he is naming Ralph Fonseca as the Minister of Finance for 2012. But he did say that he met Fonseca several times. He also told prosecutor that Zubar Kazi was part of that meeting. Now, Kingston also told the prosecutor that they had traveled to Belize several times to talk business, to talk potential projects here in Belize. And one of those projects was an online and physical casino. This is where Ralph Fonseca names again appears or is mentioned. He said that they made several trips to Belize in December and in October as well, and they met with Ralph Fonseca. Now, in terms of that online casino business plan and the physical casino business plan, they say that Kingston said that he bought a warehouse in Belize to house the physical casino and the online casino. Kingston told the prosecutor that, the prosecutor asked Kingston, who paid for that warehouse? Kingston said he paid for that warehouse. Kingston was asked, with which fund did you use to pay that warehouse? And he said that he used the monies from the tax credit fraud to pay for that warehouse. And he also mentioned, when asked, he also mentioned that the warehouse was under the name of Ralph Fonseca. So Ralph Fonseca's name was mentioned late this evening before the court broke for the week.
So, good night, Hippolyta. Of course, that's quite a bit of information after sitting in court for the past few days that we start to get some details coming out about Jacob Kingston and Lev Derman's relationship with key players here in Belize. You clearly stated in the beginning that they are working they're working on a timeline. So they went through his childhood, his college education, and now we're looking at 2012 specifically where this information is coming from. There is a specific mention of Miami meetings that took place as well, as and also trips to Belize. Can you tell me a bit more about that?
Yes, as I mentioned, through October to December 2012, Kingston spoke about trips to Miami and to Belize and meetings he had with Lev Derman and other co-conspirators in this billion-dollar tax fraud here in the U.S. He mentioned in the meeting in Miami, such persons like Zubar Kazi was there, other associates he worked with in terms of this tax fraud, and as well Fonseca in that meeting. They spoke about projects in Belize. Now, in December, he mentioned that there were several trips he made to Belize along with Lev Derman. He said that Lev Derman invited him to travel to Belize to visit project sites and to talk about proposed projects. Now, the online casino and the physical casino was one of the projects they were looking at. They were also looking at fuel depot here in Belize, and they were also looking at to remodel one of the ports. They did not mention any port or any specific port, but there were the online casino and physical casino for which the warehouse was bought for, as well as the fuel depot, and as well as the remodeling of a port here in Belize.
But there wasn't any specific name given to these businesses, because I know we've had previous reports about Lions Gaming Company, which is registered in Belize, and that is a part of the documents and a part of the exhibits that should be presented in court. But what you've said is that it wasn't specifically mentioned that the online gambling business or casino is Lions Gaming.
Yeah, it wasn't specifically mentioned today, but like I said, the court broke to give jurors time to reach home because of the snow today as well. But the prosecution mentioned that they will continue with Belize on Monday. But in terms of that Lions Gaming company, we know that there are email correspondences between Amy Peterson to Jacob Kingston regarding banking application for this company in Belize. We do know that the word lion or the animal lion is favorite to Derman. He's obsessed with this lion name or the animal. In fact, middle name, when he changed name here in Belize, is Aslan, which means lion in Turkish. And it was also revealed in court today that he was trying to set up a company for his son George in Singapore. And that company would have been named Singa, which means lion in Indonesia as well.
Clearly, he has a fascination there.
Yes.
But coming back to some of the other business interests and some of the individuals who were named in being able to, that was named in court, you spoke as well of former Minister Ralph Fonseca, and also Kazi was mentioned as well, right? Have there been any other names that Belizeans mentioned thus far?
Yeah, in terms of Ralph Fonseca, it was also noted that Derman and Kingston had dinner with Ralph Fonseca in Miami. They conducted business, or what he said, done business with Belize ministers. And I guess he was referring to Fonseca. In terms of Kazi, Zubar Kazi appears in the 2013 Auditor General's report as having received a fraudulent Belizean nationality. And I also believe that he received a Belizean passport as well. And I believe that he is a businessman here in Belize operating a shrimp farm along the coastal road.
That's right. We did have a previous report looking at Zubar Kazi as the general manager of Paradise Shrimp Farm in the south, and also previous reports that came out in Utah about the Washakie Energy providing funds to the University of Utah that was then invested in Paradise Shrimp Farm for different studies to take place and also to look at wind and solar energy. But those connections weren't made in court today, right?
Those connections were made in court as yet, and we're hoping that the prosecution will delve more into those details on Monday.
Now, of course, Belize is still awaiting to hear whether or not the evidence in terms of the text messages between Jacob Kingston and John Saldivar will be presented in court and when it will be presented. What's the indication that you have right now, Hipólito?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the prosecutor today only focused on 2012, up to December 2012. And delve more into that, I believe that the prosecutor wants to know how these monies were used in terms of Kingston. Because one of the most crucial part of what came up today is that Kingston revealed that the monies acquired through this fraud were used to buy a warehouse, which was, according to Kingston, under the name of Ralph Fonseca. That's a big liability there because they use monies resulting from this fraud.
Yeah, the
to buy
proceeds of the fraud. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Now,
I was going to ask if you can share with us just in the way you have been seeing the line of questioning so far, talking about what took place specifically in Belize, and I know in Turkey as well. This is a part of the case, the tax fraud case, in looking at how the money was potentially laundered. Is that what you understand it?
yes, that is exactly what I understand coming up from today, that they're established how is it that Kingston and Lev Derman use this money in Belize and in Turkey. So we're trying to see what will come out on Monday because they were moving into 2013, where Lev Derman was more involved. I know that it has been reported that Francis Fonseca, this is not the first time Ralph name has name in terms of this entire case. We know that during the Prime Minister's press conference, it did indicated that Ralph Fonseca introduced Lev Derman as a businessman. We know that Michael Perfit has gone on record to say that he casually met Derman through his very good friend, if I may quote, the Honorable Ralph Fonseca. He's saying Derman as a person interested in doing business in Belize. But this is 2012. The prosecution will move into 2013 on Monday and see how far Derman's tentacle penetrated Belize and the government. And I guess everyone in Belize is waiting for that text message revelation. Again, we have to wait on the line of questioning from the prosecution in terms of at what timeline they'll move on to those text messages.
Yes, so clearly court ended today when things started to get a bit more interesting in terms of information regarding Belize, huh?
Yes, prematurely I may say.
All right, but of course tomorrow there won't be any court. So
yeah, tomorrow there's no court. Court resumes at 9 o'clock on Monday. There will be 10 o'clock Belize time on Monday, and they will proceed as what the prosecutor had indicated with Belize and Turkey. And again, we're hoping that they will delve into how these monies were spent and the connection between Lev Derman, Jacob Kingston, and how they communicated, which is one of the things I want to talk about now, Marlene. They talk about text messages. They talk about burner phones. How is it that Kingston and Derman communicated? It was only through FaceTime and text messages, and it was through burner phones. Now, burner phones are just temp phones. You use it once or twice, and you get rid of it. You destroy it. And according to Kingston, Derman said that it's better to use burner phones because the government could not track them. And after they're done using that specific burner phone, they destroy it, so it's making it even more difficult for the US government to track them. So I guess they're laying the foundation in terms of communication between Kingston and Derman and anybody else who came in contact with these two individuals.
Okay. Well, Hippolyta, thank you for your reports this week. And of course, we will pick this back up on Monday with the subsequent follow-up with the case on Monday.
Yes, thank you, Marlene.
All right. The executive of the United Democratic Party, following a meeting of its National Party Council last Saturday, has decided to limit access to the local media in covering the upcoming leadership convention. On the contrary, we understand that an observer from the United States Embassy's political office has been granted full access to the day's events. Historically, the media has been allowed the freedom to cover the event in its entirety, save for the actual casting of votes by delegates. This time, however, things will be a lot different, since the convention, which is billed as a two-in-one event, will include the election of a new party leader, as well as the administration of the party's business. That decision will severely restrain the media's ability to bring to its audience up-to-the-minute reports of this much-anticipated race. The restrictions represent a step backward as to timely reporting. News 5 spoke by phone with outgoing chairman Alberto August.
The United Democratic Party is governed by the instructions coming out of the various arms of the party. In this instance, we're talking about the National Party Council, which met last Saturday at our headquarters in Belize City. When the item came up about the media wanting to participate in the coverage of our national convention, the question was put to the council. And the council, after deliberating on the matter, agreed that yes, the media will be allowed to cover certain aspects, certain parts of our national convention. This is a unique situation. For the first time, we're having our convention inside of a closed area where the voting is going to be happening simultaneously with the conduct of the party's business. Previously, what we have had was conventions at one, the voting at one side, and then the conducting of the various aspects of the party business in another area. Under those circumstances, the media was invited to cover the party convention. But in terms of the voting, we always continue to maintain the secrecy of the ballot. And for that purpose, inside of this current situation, as is the Belize City Center, it is in one confined location, and then therefore the voting and the party business will be happening in one area. Therefore, the National Party Council agreed that we should not have the media inside of the station while the delegates of our party are voting. For the simple reason that there are some delegates who prefer not to be so exposed. And that is the reason.
According to August, at the conclusion of the vote, the media will be invited to witness the counting of ballots, as well as the party leader's address and the leader-elect's statement. Those presentations are critical to document, but in these days of instant communication, our viewers and social media followers will be limited to the information building up to that conclusion.
After the votes have been cast, then of course the council agreed that then the media will be invited into the station to witness the other events of our national convention.
Speak to me about the actual parameters. We're looking at the Belize City Center, and of course that's where the convention will be held. But will we be allowed to video both contestants as they enter, as well as the persons or the supporters who are coming out on Sunday?
Nothing has changed from the access that the media has had to any of our convention. Nothing has changed. Basically, the media comes in and the media can interact with the public. But in this instance, the public and the voters will be in one confined location. So all we're saying is that, yes, the media has always done this. They have always come out there and they have always interviewed the persons who are participating in the convention. So for this purpose, like I said, you guys will be coming in. The media will be invited into the station as soon as the ballots have been cast, and then the counting process is in place. And after the counting, we will announce the results of the election. The results of the election will be announced, and then afterwards, the media will have access to interview. Of course, immediately after the results have been announced, the new leadership of the party will be sworn in. The new party leader will be delivering his inaugural address, and then the convention will be declared closed by the new chairman of the party.
Coming up, a Belizean living in China tells us how the coronavirus is affecting life and business.
I'm
The death toll due to the novel coronavirus continues to climb. It is reported that more than 550 persons have died since the outbreak in Wuhan, China. More than 30,000 others are reportedly infected, most of them from China. Locally, travel to China and from China is not recommended by the Ministry of Health, while in other countries there is a ban. Earlier today, we spoke via Skype to a Belizean who lives and owns a business in one of the provinces. Lilian Molina is currently in Bali, Indonesia, and cannot get back to Shanghai because of the restrictions in place. Here is News 5's Dwayne Moody.
It's been 3 weeks since the outbreak of the novel coronavirus, which was first detected in Wuhan, China. Population 11 million. To date, about 560 persons, primarily the vulnerable older population whose immune systems were low, have died as a result of the virus. But there are many more who are recovering with medication and millions who have managed to take measures to prevent contracting the virus. While the rest of the world is in a frenzy, in mainland China, the government has built a new hospital in days and in the respective provinces has imposed travel bans, while businesses have shut down in an effort to prevent the spread to other areas.
The majority of the virus itself has actually been affected within Wuhan, not so much outside of that province. Okay. So granted, what the government has done is that they have basically shut down every single province. There's not too much transportation within each province because they're trying to actually contain the virus. What the government has basically been advising people to do is to wear a mask when you're outside. You're also supposed to wash your hands thoroughly, ideally every hour or so. Not to have much contact with people, and also not to be in areas that have too many people. There's large public areas.
Lilian Molina has been living in China for over a decade. Originally from Belize City, Molina first traveled to study in Taiwan back in 2004 and now resides in Shanghai, China, where she recently opened a restaurant, 501 Eats, that features cuisine from across the Caribbean, including Belize. She's the owner and head chef. Molina says that the outbreak is creating panic and is having an adverse effect on businesses, tourism, and other sectors.
People are now scared to actually leave homes, right? So the way how it's affected is not just my restaurant, but also many businesses in China, is that we're not able to conduct business the way that we were. The F&B industry in China is a very large industry. There's a lot of different restaurants from different types of cuisines. Unfortunately, for us, I mean, the way how I've been affected is that, I'm not getting as much people coming into the restaurant. Or, in this case, the management of the building where my restaurant is actually located has requested that we shut down instead due to the fact that they do not want to put anyone in danger, right? So yes, for me, it's affected me a lot in terms of my business. It's affected me in terms of the finances that I'm supposed to be getting from the business itself, having to pay salaries, having to pay rent and such. Of course, it affects greatly, but it's not just me. It's so many other industries as well. When this entire news broke out, what happened was that, Chinese people will tend to go back home to the province where they're originally from to spend time with their families. But because they're there, they're not able to enter back into Shanghai in this case, which is where I'm located. Wow. So it's caused a little bit of an issue in terms of transportation. It's caused issues in terms of people wanting to go back to work. But also because the government is trying to make sure that this virus is not spread, what they've done is that they've actually extended the Spring Festival this year to an additional 2 weeks.
A lot of international flights going in and out of China have been cancelled, and there are many countries that have put in place screening to those who have traveled to China or other countries where the virus has been detected. The government of China has issued a statement to say that work is to resume on February 10th. Molina is also president of the Caribbean Association in China. She says that there are currently about 16 Belizeans living in that Asian country.
I also manage a group of the Belizeans based in China. There's many of us, there's only around 16 so far that I'm aware of, Mix of students, a mix of business people, and people who are also just living there. So in regards to how we are as Belizeans, we're actually doing okay.
The novel coronavirus has been categorized as a zoonotic disease. That is, it jumps from animals to humans, and scientists have linked its cause to the consumption of wildlife such as bats and snakes. Being that she is in the food and beverage industry, we asked Molina about this.
To be honest, this is the first time that I had heard of any place or any market that's actually selling any of these types of animals. I believe, or in fact, I'm pretty sure that this was actually an illegal sell. This originally started from a market from a vendor who was not selling legally these animals. First of all, these were not legal animals for him to sell. And this is where the outbreak came. So I think at this point right now I have been living in China for about 15 years, almost 16 years now. And I've never come across in any cuisine, in the cuisine that China has, any of these animals at all. I have never been offered this type of food before, And I think that the panic and hysteria that's happening is fueled a lot by racism and also xenophobia.
Dwayne Moody for News 5.
As we reported on Wednesday, Lord Michael Ashcroft has formally applied to join a lawsuit against the government of Belize that was brought by the Belize Peace Movement. Ashcroft's application is to join the claimants as an interested party in a legal challenge that, once successful, would prompt government to conduct a redistricting exercise prior to the upcoming general elections. The existing state of affairs after re-registration indicates a gaping disparity in the voter composition in all 31 constituencies, and that disproportion can only be rectified via the redistricting exercise. In some constituencies, there are more than 7,000 electors, while in others, there are as few as 2,000. Stann Creek West has the largest number of voters, while Fort George in Belize City has the smallest number. According to attorney Andrew Marshallek, Ashcroft's addition to the claim serves to bring more attention to the matter.
What it does, first off, is it brings all the news agencies around asking, why is Lord Ashcroft getting involved? So the simple answer to that in the first instance is that it's to draw attention to the claim and to a problem that has long since existed that he doesn't believe is getting sufficient attention. As to what he brings to the table, Lord Ashcroft brings a lot of resources, both in terms of legal expertise, demographers, political scientists, who can inform and highlight what are some of the problems they currently expose.
Lord Ashcroft has been said to be a financier of both political parties. Might this be seen by others as a way of perhaps him sticking it to the man, in a manner of speaking?
Well, I'm sure there'll be many viewpoints on it. But at the end of the day, from my perspective, it doesn't really matter. What it is that there is a problem in that there's significant malapportionment between the electoral divisions, the result of which is to render the voting weight of each person in Belize most unequal. For instance, the calculations show that a person in Fort George or in Queen Square has 5 times the voting weight of a person in, say, Stann Creek West. And the Constitution provides for the electoral divisions to be more or less equal. The international standard is that it could be plus or minus 10%. We are so out of whack. I mean, we have very small divisions and then we have very large ones. And the result of it is that those voting in the divisions with the smaller numbers, their vote carry more weight in terms of electing the government.
We asked Marshall Eck about the odds of conducting a redistricting exercise ahead of the upcoming general elections, given what appears to be a tight timeline. He says that should the Supreme Court rule in the claimant's favor, resources can be made available to get the job done in a limited time.
The Supreme Court rules in the favor of the claimants,
Yes.
your client included. What's to happen next in terms of government being able to carry out this exercise on a national scale ahead of the pending elections?
The divisions can be redrawn. There is software, there's GIS software that literally puts the location, you have the address of every voter on a map, and there's softwares that will draw it for you in a fair way. It's not very difficult, and it can be done in time for a general election if somebody wanted to do it. Now, if you want to drag your feet, you could find a million reasons not to do it as well.
One of the excuses or the reasons, if I may, is that it's a costly undertaking.
Well, there you go. You have Lord Ashcroft volunteering to bring in and assist with people to get it done.
Lord Ashcroft, in the eyes of some, is a controversial figure. As much as he may be celebrated and respected in one corner, he is reviled in another. In respect of the current claimants, does he coming on board add or take away to the attention already being given to this matter?
Well, it's already adding with this interview attention to the matter. And what we hope to be able to do is to support it with good legal arguments and also with the necessary evidence to show what the shortcomings of the existing rules are, that is the extent of the malapportionment of the electoral divisions, and what are the ways of fixing it. There are a number of ways of dealing with it, and when I look at the papers, I don't think any of that is being put forward. Putting that kind of information before the court can only assist the court in arriving at a just conclusion. And that's all this is about. At the end of the day, what people think about Lord Ashcroft or what they don't think about him doesn't really matter. The voters in Belize have a problem in that the way things are set up, the people in Belize, who's a little more than 20% of the voting population, get to elect 42% of the elected representatives. That is unfair. The weight their vote carry is far more than what people in the districts, the votes of people in the districts, are worth in terms of electing representatives. The Constitution envisages that the electoral division should be more or less equally drawn, and we are to hold the authorities to that standard. From way back in 2012, after the last election, the formal report from the OS mission, the observer mission, brought this to the attention of the government and the Elections and Boundaries Commission. They've known since 2012 of the malapportionment. Nothing has been done.
Unconfirmed reports are that several gunshots were fired around the Belize-Guatemala border around 10 o'clock on Wednesday night. Photos circulated of shattered glass caused by the shooting. Reports are that the Benque Viejo police as well as Guatemalan authorities arrived on the scene shortly after. Online reports say that one person was detained, but local police told the media that they didn't have any information on the shooting. On Wednesday afternoon, just after 12:30, a pair of robbers walked into Henry's supermarket on College Road in Corozal and held up the proprietor at gunpoint. The men got away with some cash, but police quickly apprehended them. Authorities say that the suspects are from the area. The store's surveillance camera captured the robbery. Senior Superintendent Alberto Romero gives us the details.
Police responded to a robbery report at Henry's store at College Road, Corozal District. Upon their arrival, they met a complainant who reported that two armed masked men came to the store, pointed firearms at him, and stole an amount of cash. Thereafter, the male persons fled from the area, and while fleeing from the area, they fired a shot whilst they were crossing one of the streets. Quick police response led to the detention of 2 suspects in San Antonio Village, and an amount of cash was found on one of the persons. Both persons are now in custody, and investigation continues into this matter.
Police have detained 1 person and are looking for another in connection with the robbery at La Popular Bakery on Cemetery Road in Belize City. Just before 8 on Tuesday night, 2 armed men held up the cashier and demanded money. Superintendent Alejandro Coa says that while they have detained 1 person, the stolen money was not recovered.
Police responded to a robbery report at La Popular Bakery, located on George Price Highway, where they spoke to one of the workers who informed the police that whilst they were inside of the business establishment, 2 male persons entered the said establishment, and one of them, armed with a firearm, pointed at one of the cashiers and demanded for them to hand over the proceeds of that day. As a result, they handed over an undisclosed amount of money, and thereafter the 2 male persons made good their escape.
So that particular establishment has surveillance footage in terms of cameras right inside. Upon review of that footage, has police been able to identify who the perpetrators of this crime are?
Police have detained a male person and they are looking for another one. And yes, the identity of one of them has already been established by police, and that is the one that is in custody.
Any success with trying to recover the stolen money, sir?
Not at this moment.
After the break, steel pans for the UB. The Belize Bank grants a generous donation. The University of Belize has received a generous donation to start up the UB Steel. The donation of $50,000 was made by the Belize Bank at the end of January and will be used to acquire the necessary pans for the steel ban. UB says the initiative paves the way for the development of a pathway for those students interested in music and wish to take on academic or technical careers or to hone their skills in music performance at the National University. UB's goal is to build a music program that will not only develop the creative arts, but also provide students with opportunities to pursue fulfilling careers in music industries and become major contributors to the ongoing articulation of the Belizean cultural identity. The donation was presented to President Clement Sankat by Lyndon Giuseppe, the executive chairman of the Belize Bank. On Tuesday, we reported that 2 men were charged for separate killings that happened in Concepcion Village in the Corozal district. Today, Senior Superintendent of Police Gilberto Romero shared details of the charges and what the investigation has uncovered about the motives behind the killings.
They reference the murder of Juan Mendes that occurred at Concepcion Village. Police have since arrested and charged Diego Correa for the crime of murder, and reference the murder of Daniel Cano, which also occurred in Concepcion Village. Police arrested and charged Jesus Monterosa also for the crime of murder. This was done after consultation with the Director of Public Prosecutions.
Have your investigations revealed why these 2 individuals were killed, sir?
Again, one of the murders was a result of a fight, and then the others had some dispute, and that is what led to that murder.
They say that the death of Brian Harris is now being investigated as a murder. As we reported almost 2 weeks ago, Harris passed away after being in and out of the hospital for gunshot injuries. Today, police told the media that a post-mortem conducted shows that Harris died as a result of the gunshot injuries he sustained in December of last year. But up to this time, cops are no closer to solving this homicide.
Reference the death of Mr. Brian Harris. Post-mortem was conducted on the body. After the conclusion, the doctor certified that the cause of death was because of the gunshot injuries that he received. That matter is still being investigated by Hattieville Police.
No perpetrators have been identified as yet?
We know that from the initial stage, Mr. Harris was interviewed while he was alive, and he could not describe who his attackers were, and as a result, we were still unable to definitely say if it was one person or more than one person who shot at him on that night when he was shot.
So the investigation is a bit challenged because of that, right, sir?
Yes, the area where the incident occurred, it was lonely and it was late in the night, and we have to remember that he was found until the following morning by a passerby in the area.
Last December, the government made a surprise decision that drew criticism from many quarters when it declared that in respect of gillnets, there would be a control and eventual phase-out. Oceana Belize says that while they applaud government for recognizing gillnets as a destructive gear, there is a need for the ban on gillnet to be decisive. In a release issued today, Oceana says, quote, "Today, Bamopan is proposing a ban with no defined term, which will compromise the restoration of Belizean fisheries and ecosystems," unquote. That decision, according to Oceana, results in the government passing on the $1 million that they've put forward to help Belizean fishers transition away from gillnets. Today, we spoke with Oceana's Janelle Chanona, who shares more about why the ban on gillnets must be decisive.
It is historic that they came out in December and said that gillnets are destructive, and as I interpreted what they said in December, that the only reason they didn't implement a ban was because they didn't want to marginalize fishers. And we are totally appreciative of that fact, and that's one of the many reasons why we had did what we did, which was attract funding to a transition process to make sure that did not happen for any of the licensed fishers. I can tell you that the initial vetting that we participated in January has taken the list down to 71 people. And further vetting is expected to bring the list even further down, possibly substantially lower. But all that to say is that looking at how the programs run by Oceana and the coalition would set out, none of the licensed fishers that are eligible to have a commercial fisher folk license would ever be marginalized. So then we are trying to figure out what is the reticence of not putting in a ban, but not just a ban in name, but a ban that actually makes sense. Because if you put in a ban and then, some future administrations say, oh, well, there's no rationale for doing this, then by not having a set time frame to give the ban a chance to work and to show the maximum benefits to fishers first, but certainly to the country as a whole, it needs to include that so it can be meaningful. We have experiences that we can look to. Mexico had a count moratorium, for example. They did it for 5 years, then they did an assessment and said, no, this needs to be longer. Bahamas just published a paper saying, fisheries policies that they put in, they're beginning to see the results after 15 years. So all we're trying to underscore is that we're not being arbitrary in saying that there needs to be a set time frame for this to be in place. It's that science and regional experience and just, everything that we have at our disposal is showing that for this to be meaningful, there has to be an understanding that this ban will be in place for a set period of time so that we can establish a baseline now and get the data to show this is why this was helpful. And that's what we're pushing for.
When we come back, mediation training for community workers. A week-long event in Belize City is sharpening the skills of police officers and others who deal with persons, particularly youth, involved in crime. Restore Belize has organized a training workshop on mediation, which is looking at a number of issues that have to do with conflict resolution. News 5's Dwayne Moody reports.
Police officers attached to the community policing unit and personnel from agencies that work with young people in conflict have been engaged in a week-long training hosted by Restore Belize in partnership with the Ministry of Human Development, Social Transformation and Poverty Alleviation through its Youth and Community Transformation Project. The workshop focuses on identifying sources of conflict, mediation tools, including questioning skills, problem solving, trust building, and de-escalating conflicts.
Restore Belize has a mandate to respond to violent crimes, particularly within the Belize City communities. Conflict resolution is not new to us. We have done this before with many different schools, primarily in the more violent communities in Belize City. But what is different about this particular training is that we're also including community workers. We know that as much as the teachers work with the students, the government, as well as other social partners and NGOs, they also work along with young people through different programs. It's important for us to arm all our community workers with these very important skills in conflict mediation.
One of the facilitators for the training is a counselor by profession, Pamela Dyer. She says that at times these community workers and NGOs who engage with the youth must understand their roles as mediators. Sometimes that may mean removing the proverbial work hat.
For me, as a counselor and as a trained mediator, it takes some time to develop the skills. It's a new way of dealing with crime and violence. It's a new way of even dealing with your own personal life. It's a skill that you take away for yourself and for your profession. So I could understand the police officer in terms of have to go into different roles, because you're trained as a police officer, you're trained as a counselor. And I could speak from my own experience as a counselor. I had to adapt the new skills. It's not about making the decisions for the person, but using the skills like the communication skills, in probing, in paraphrasing, or reframing, taking out the negative out of the conflict itself from the conversation of the disputants. As a mediator, you're not a counselor, right? So you have to really remember your role. It's not a dual situation. So if while you're mediating a person or dispute or two disputants and you realize that this person really needs counseling, that's when you have to make note of it and refer to.
For the police department, community policing is key to solving crimes, and they would oftentimes come in contact with youths in conflict. Sergeant Marlene Montejo spoke of some of the challenges they face and how the training will assist them in carrying out their duties.
Gaining the trust from the youths, and that is one of the biggest ones we are learning here. Of all, we must learn that being the mediator is not being the police officer at that time. We are the ones who would usually respond to conflicts between youths and things, and we know these days our youths are having a lot of conflict among themselves, being students or youths just on the street. So today, so me and some of my colleagues, we are here. We usually do mediation, but like they say, the old school way. So we are here to learn and enhance our knowledge of doing it the proper way.
Dwayne Moody for News 5.
Coming up after the break, a building series workshop wraps up in Belize City. Representatives from various institutions, including Human Services, the Police Department, and members from the judiciary, including judges and prosecutors, have been engaged in a 3-day workshop on the online exploitation of children. It is being spearheaded by the International Center for Missing and Exploited Children and seeks to build capacity of the Belizean authorities as well as the judiciary officers and provide them with the tools to detect and better address the issue of online child exploitation. According to Director of Law Enforcement Training and Technology of IKMEC, Guillermo Galarza, the training is being done in partnership with the United Nations of Drugs and Crimes Cybercrime Program.
So we're training those police officers to get a basic understanding of the issue, to get a basic knowledge of how to do proactive work, and really to create awareness. This is a global issue. It's not just here in Belize, but it's all over the world. So our hope is to really build capacity by educating those front-line officers and the investigators. One of the great initiatives that we have developed is we have developed partnerships with the industry. Companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter, and other companies have taken a very proactive approach into developing tools and working with law enforcement to really try to protect children online. We work with many other organizations and private industry companies that have developed some of the tools to identify victims online and reduce the workload of the investigators trying to identify these victims.
IKMEC is based in Alexandria, Virginia in the USA. According to data available, most of the abuse starts at home. 25% of the abuses are committed by someone in authority close to the child. So the organization continues to develop awareness programs to educate children and parents about the risks related to having children having access to technology at an early age. Director Guillermo Galarza also spoke on the need for robust cybercrime legislation, something that Belize is currently working on.
A lot of these child sex offenders do know that kids are surfing online, they're going into social medias, they're utilizing new apps and new mobile technology. So we have to be aware, not just as organizations, but as a community. And parents need to understand that kids can get into a lot of trouble by chatting with anyone online. We believe that without the proper legislation, law enforcement can't do their work, right? And in many ways, legislation specific to online child exploitation is very important. It needs to be defined in the national code. So in 2006, we released a national study, the model legislation, and you can download it in our website. And you can see all the countries breakdown. And there are countries like Belize that do have some legislation, but it's not fully there. And we need to get the policymakers, the government leaders to really look at legislation, because I keep saying, without the proper legislation, law enforcement can't do the work.
About 2 months ago, we showed you the start of a series of workshops called the Municipal Building Unit Awareness Workshop Series. The Ministry of Housing, along with its partners, conducted countrywide workshops with municipal-level building units and stakeholders in building and construction. The workshops are to discuss processes needed to get approval to build in Belize. The series wrapped up today in Belize City, and here's more from Belize City Deputy Mayor Oscar Arnold.
The Belize City Council, being the municipal body here in Belize City, is collaborating with the Economic Development Unit, local government, and the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development. And so what is happening is that whenever you wanted to do any construction or you wanted to alter your building in any form or matter, you used to have to apply for a permit. And that used to be handled through the central building authorities. At that time, the municipal bodies had what they call local building authorities. In 2017, an MOU was signed where this responsibility would have been shed over to all municipalities. But there is a transitional period, or there was a transitional period where the municipalities had to ensure that they had the technical capacity and the technical people in-house to be able to do that. It took some municipalities longer than others, but today what is happening is that all those agencies are coming together and putting out the information to realtors, to financial institutions, to insurance companies, to contractors and anybody who is in that field or who has some stake in that construction industry. One of the feedback is that now, because the workload is shared, meaning before, if you were constructing in PG, you had to wait until the Central Building Authority sent someone, one of their inspectors, all the way that is based in Belize City. Now you can do that through the Punta Gorda Town Council, so it cuts down on the time. Also, the information gathered here and the way things are working is to ensure that the laws and the building codes and the construction codes keep changing and keep relevant. We want to ensure that the housing stock that people are constructing now are climate resilient and also can stand up to flooding and hurricane and that sort of thing. Safety of people and safety of life is of paramount importance, and if we can get it right from the construction phase, then we are ahead of the game.
And that's the news. Don't forget that tonight's broadcast is available in both text and streaming video at channel5belize.com. You can also connect with us on our Facebook page at facebook.com/News5Live. I'm Marlene Cuellar. Thanks for joining us, and from all of us here at News 5, good night.